Welcome to Tame the Taboo. This podcast is brought to you by Discover Her Health. Discover Her Health specializes in healthcare, education, and resources for her most intimate concerns. I'm your host, Nurse Jenna Ray. I'm a women's health and gender-related nurse practitioner, and I am making it my business to take you from sufferer to sensei. So if you are suffering from conditions that are not easily treated in an annual exam, or you want to join me on this journey to become my healthiest, wealthiest, best business owning self, sit back, relax, and enjoy these episodes. Welcome back to another episode of Tame the Taboo. I am your host, Nurse Jenna Ray, and I am so excited. Today we have board certified wellness coach, right?
Yep.
Preethi Raju. And I am very excited to have Preethi on this episode because we get to hear from a different perspective. Oftentimes I'll have like other, clinical colleagues and, providers on the episode. But today we get to hear from someone who is supporting clients in a very different way. So Preethi, I just like to ask you if you can introduce yourself to the audience and tell the girls who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Jenna, I'm so happy to be here. You are the absolute best, first of all. I'm Preethi, and I am a board certified health and wellness coach. And I focus and work with women who are experiencing pelvic pain. And I like to say I work with them so that they can then go enjoy organic, juicy lives that they deserve. And so, as a coach, I'm not a therapist and I'm not a clinician, but I like to think of myself as a sounding board to help clients really achieve the goals that they are setting for themselves to improve their quality of life. Because I know that once you get that diagnosis, as long as it takes for women, it's easy to stick to that diagnosis. And I've been there myself when I, was diagnosed with vaginismus or vulvodynia. I stuck to that for a long time, but I want to help women get past that and to say, okay, so now what? How do I have the best life that I can possibly have, knowing that maybe I'll have to manage this condition for a long time, but it's not going to be the center of my life.
So you help women to de-identify themselves as victims of vulvodynia, as people suffering through vaginismus, and really start to center their identity in other ways with kind of these diagnoses in the background.
Exactly. Yeah, that was beautifully said. And really help clients understand what their intrinsic motivations are and help achieve those and be their support system. And because oftentimes patients may go to providers once a year, they might see a therapist, once or twice a week, but having someone by your side as you're getting these different diagnoses, going to a pelvic floor PT, just even deciding to talk to your family or your partner can take months to decide to do, or buying that next set of dilators. It's a big step, even though we just think of it as, oh, this is just what you do when you have these conditions.
So for me, it's like, okay, I give people the blueprint, like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And I know that there is so much life in between those steps, and I can't be by your side to help you through that. And so you are offering kind of a service that fills in the gap.
Exactly. And then as a patient, that's kind of where I felt like there was a gap, and I wanted to fill it.
So tell me more about how you transitioned from patient to kind of like an expert in your own right, and then a health coach. So kind of from sufferer to sensei. Tell me about that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I have, a pretty textbook story, like really never able to insert a tampon, had pain during sex, like every single time. And I was with a partner for a long time, 8 or 9 years, and we really thought once we started having sex that the pain would eventually go away, but this was severe pain. The way I describe it is someone sticking a Q-tip in your ear and scraping your insides with a needle at the same time. And I'm sure you've heard of these descriptions, Jenna. And at that point, I was in my early 20s, and I had never experienced any kind of healthcare issue before. And I could not believe that my body was letting me down. So I continued and continued until my body and my brain said no. They were done. I would have severe anxiety, just like walking home from work. And I was completely disassociated for a few years. And until I decided, and I would still go to gynecologists who would basically tell me, like, use lube, those kinds of suggestions that don't really help when you have the severe kind of nerve pain. So it took me a long time to be properly diagnosed. And honestly, it took COVID. Like, COVID was horrible, but at that point, I moved to DC. I was single, and I found great providers like yourself who were actually able to give me a very simple numbing agent that helped me get on the path to healing. And what I needed actually was time and to not be touched for a little bit until I could build back that trust between my mind and my body. And I can fully say now I'm on the other side, and I'm no longer catastrophizing about will I ever get better? Because when you are a sensual person, as I identified to be, and I think a lot of women identify to be, it takes a lot out of you to have that relationship or your sense of self be taken away by something as painful as pelvic pain.
Hmm.
And so, oh, sorry, to answer the second part of your question, I was described often as like the most proactive patient a provider had seen. But like I said, like, actually, you need time. Like, this is not something that just because you're proactive, you're going to find the answer. And so I realized the more I started doing things for myself and taking it easy on myself and learning as much as I could, my symptoms got better. And so there is such a mind body component. And I realized, and I found this gap in the healthcare system. So that's why I decided to become a coach and really focus on, chronic pelvic pain.
Okay. I love that you brought up like the trust in yourself and the trust that you have to have in your body. Talk more about like some steps that maybe you took to kind of build up that trust.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing that I did was not put pressure on myself to have sex, right? That can be very, very hard, especially when you're in a partnership and you feel like you owe this to someone else. But because I took that off the table, and granted, this was during COVID, I was then able to really document my progress as I made it through the dilators. I also did go to a pelvic floor PT every week. So even if it's not a coach, like, that person was my support system during that time. And they really celebrated my wins. And there would be, weeks and months where I didn't make progress on a particular dilator. And that was okay too. So that's more of the physical component of it. For the mental and emotional components of it, I started talking a lot more about my story. I started listening to podcasts. And every time I did talk to a friend or a friend of a friend, they had some version of Me Too. And that became really powerful. Once I started opening my mouth, I then felt like we weren't alone. We all have these intimate stories, whatever they might be.
Yeah, and it's so important that you have a community and that you don't feel like I'm the only one that's suffering, right? Because you highlight how during your journey, when you were still suffering, you were still bringing it up to your providers. It wasn't like you were like, okay, well, this is my lot in life. I'm just going to lay down and take it. You were still trying to access care. Talk
Right.
to me about like what that feels like to bring it up time and time again and be met with like either no help or things that are harmful.
I like to think of pelvic pain as it is actually a debilitating condition. And we might not be bedridden, but it hits you in terms of who you are as a person. Even simple things like riding a bike, sitting for long periods of time, wearing tight pants hurt. And to go to a person who you think is the most highly qualified, right? Gynecologist, they've been through the most years of school. And to have them say, you're fine, when it is such a textbook case of these conditions. Like, literally all it takes is a Q-tip to my skin to know that I have this condition or one has this condition. So I felt incredibly let down by those providers. And there's also a huge aspect of shame. So that I didn't tell any of my family members or most of my friends did not know. Like, and I'm a pretty optimistic person, so I just assumed things would get better. But I think there's also a huge aspect of shame that prevents people from seeking care. And I think your sexual health is just as important as your mental or physical health, right? It has great effects on your nervous system. It has great effects on your overall well-being and mental health. So we just need to talk about the damn thing.
Yeah, and I think it's important to highlight that, most of us providers are never trained in this work, right?
Yeah.
And when you talk about the Q-tip test, it really is very simple. It's just a Q-tip, and what we do is we touch the vulvar vestibule. And so the vestibule is just a fancy word that means like entry or hallway, right? Like your church might have a vestibule, or any fancy building will have like an opening. And so the vestibule for the vulva, for the vagina, is that entry where it's not the labia, not the hair bearing part, and not internal, not the vagina, right? It's that kind of opening, that doorway into the vagina. And there's so much function there. So the urethra's there, that's where you urinate. You have these glands that are there that secrete lubrication, that are dependent on hormones. And then you have tons of nerve endings that provide signals, so both pleasure and pain. And really, if you are never taught to examine the vestibule, which again, no school that is on earth, right? Like it has to teach this stuff, right? So all of the vestibule experts, we have sought this knowledge on our own, independent of our schooling and our training. And so when you go to the gynecologist, what we do for your pap smear, for instance, is we stick that speculum straight in, bypass the vulva, bypass the vestibule, open it up, right? And then we're looking at the cervix and looking at the vagina. And then even if you go to a dermatologist who's interested in vulvar issues, they're looking at the vulva. So who is in charge of that transition zone that is in charge of so much function that creates so much dysfunction? And the answer is no one,
No
right?
one. And I was listening to, I think, a podcast by Erwin Goldstein, and he said 90% of pain originates from that vestibule area, but gynecologists are not even trained to look at it and derive meaning from it.
Yeah. When I talk about vestibulodynia, Latin word for pain, meaning dynia. So pain in the vestibule, which now we have a basic understanding of. I talk about the big three. So you have muscles, nerves, and then hormones, right? All involved in the vestibule. And so when we have these chronic pain conditions, you have to be able to think, is this muscles? Is this hormones? Is this, a tissue issue? Is it nerves? And oftentimes it's usually a combination of all three of those things. So you can imagine how difficult it is as a patient if you're only working on one of those things with like pelvic floor physical therapy. You're only working on relaxing those tight muscles. If you have these two other pieces that are still missing, right, you're never really making that progress to break the pain cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me kind of, was there a moment where a light bulb went off for you where you were like, okay, not only am I accessing pleasure now for myself and like getting rid of the pain, but also I'm going to coach other women on how to do this?
Yeah, honestly, I recently left my job at One Medical, which is a primary care practice, and I was inspired by my colleagues who were health and wellness coaches. So I talked to them, and that's kind of when the light bulb went off, where I was like, oh, I could take this role, which is around helping people with chronic conditions, more likely like diabetes, hypertension, obesity, those kinds of things, and apply it to women's health related pelvic pain. And so I was really inspired by my colleagues, I would say.
So now you are an entrepreneur,
That's
right?
right.
What
That's
does
right.
that journey look like for you as someone who has now, again, made that transition from sufferer to sensei? So now you have ownership over the knowledge and you have a great understanding of it. What does it look like to work day in and day out in this space?
Yeah, honestly, I'm still figuring it out. I am a designer by quote unquote profession. And so I still think there's so much room for designing good healthcare. And I'm still extremely passionate about that. And I have all this knowledge as a coach. And I'm really passionate about creating events and spaces for people. And so in addition to one-on-one coaching, I want to create events where people feel heard and they can be in community. And so I'm really thinking about what that looks like. And I would like to create a course around overcoming pelvic pain that folks can do in their own time as well. Because what I've noticed, and especially, in the South Asian community, I've not had great attendance from the South Asian female sufferers, I would say. And so for events, and maybe there's an aspect of shame around that, but I feel like something that you can do in your own time might be, or in addition to one-on-one coaching, might be a little bit more approachable. And so thinking about not only like the biopsychosocial elements, as well as, like the physiology and the action steps you can take along the way, finding the right providers, advocating for yourself. Like these are all really important things. But I just left my job, and as you know, I've been traveling for a while, so I've been writing nonstop, I've been planning, but yeah, I'm firing on all cylinders. So we'll
I
see what the
love it.
execution looks like.
The great thing about entrepreneurship is like, at least for me, the vision is very clear. Like, we're going to
Mhm.
revolutionize women's health. Like, we're going to give women access to pleasure and help them overcome pain. But the day in and day, out, the actual steps, I am still like, is this the right choice? Am I doing the right thing? So I would just say keep moving, and your steps will be kind of laid out in front of you, and just know that you are on the right path for sure.
Thank you. Well, you're also a great inspiration. I love all of your content and all the things that you're doing.
Thank you. I'm trying, girl. So one of the things that I actually have worked on, because I feel like, we do hour-long consults here. So we can do that Q-tip test, we can talk, we can do something that I love doing called a vulvoscopy, where we take a camera and look at the vulva, look at the vestibule, examine the vagina and even the cervix if we need to. We can do all of that, but I feel like I kind of am like giving people so much information at one time that it can be overwhelming. And I do encourage people to bring a partner or a friend to the
Mhm.
visit so that they are only in charge of staying in their body and not disassociating, right? And that partner is the person who is like taking notes and maybe asking questions and really hearing me. But I developed a course specifically for vulvodynia and vestibulodynia. And really, it's a way to say, like, here's all the things that I taught you in that visit, and even some things that we probably didn't have time for. But like, now you can go through this on your own time and be able to reference it. And also, if your partner wasn't able to be in the room, like, here's this course that you guys can do together.
Oh, I love that because I think a big part of it is actually communicating what you are going through and not shutting down, right? So to be able to do that together is so powerful.
Yeah, so I'll definitely give you access to it, and I look forward to any feedback. So that is going to be
Awesome. Thank you.
one of the resources available here at the clinic. So, okay, so you're on your entrepreneurship journey. You just got back from 3 months of traveling after giving up corporate medicine.
I did.
Give
Corporate design in healthcare. Yeah.
Yes, corporate healthcare design,
Yeah.
not corporate medicine. That I'm thinking about my own story of like really feeling like, okay, I'm giving up this life that I've created for myself, but I didn't take that break. I didn't put any time into like just focusing on me. So kudos to you for like doing that. Tell me some of the highlights. Like, what were you able to get out of your travels?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a spectacular 3 months. And the catalyst was actually, I went to a mindfulness retreat in Morocco. And I led a workshop there as well on developing a pleasure mindset and envisioning what that looks like in your day to day life. And so that was like really fulfilling. Great. Just, we were in the Atlas Mountains right near Marrakesh. It was beautiful. And to be able to be in a room full of like minded people, too, that was wonderful. And while I was there, so a little backstory, I took these 3 months off also in preparation to freeze my eggs. So my goal was take some time, get the vitamins in, come back to the US, freeze my eggs at a facility in DC. I'd started the process there already. But while I was in Morocco, I met some women who had done this process in Malaga, which is where I was headed next. So I was able to get an appointment, like a next day appointment, luckily. And similar to you, your practice, I had a 1 hour appointment with a doctor and an ultrasound, and we were able to plan our next steps. And I felt like a queen. I felt like I was being taken care of. And so, and I didn't pay anything. Like they didn't even ask for my credit card. So I really had to reassess what am I doing here? And so I continued to have even more consults with different facilities in Europe and in Mexico City to really think about how I was being treated as a patient and using that as leverage for how I want to run my practice, right? Like being extremely human centered and giving that time because the time is precious. And then I went all around, the south of Spain. I visited my family in Dubai, which was amazing. And I came back to Madrid for a conference on it's called the International Consultation on Sexual Medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was exciting too, because it was 2 days and it was all of these great gynecologists, urologists, therapists from around the world. And while the conversation was largely clinical in nature because they were talking about papers that they were publishing, I learned so much about the various protocols that they want to implement in sexual medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It just made me extremely excited. I wish there were other types of providers in the room other than gynecologists and urologists, but it made me really excited. And at that time, I mentioned to you, I met Tammy Rowan, who is the provider who first properly diagnosed me in San Francisco. So it was a real like full circle moment. And I was just very happy the whole 3 months.
Amazing, amazing. So now you're back and like the dust has started to settle a little bit, and now you get to dream up and create all of these, grow and nourish all the seeds that you've been planting, which is amazing.
Yes, absolutely.
Hmm. Okay, so you are done traveling the world at least for a little bit, doing your entrepreneurship thing, working on your own healing currently, right? Do you mind sharing a little bit of like once you kind of overcome the pain and now you have access to pleasure, are you kind of done with it or is it an ongoing process? And like where are you at within that process?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely an ongoing process. It is a mindset shift where the pelvic pain isn't the big thing in your life. It's just something that you manage. And knowing that I can get through that has made me just more of a chill human. So I trust the universe a lot more. I enjoy my coffee when I'm drinking it in the morning. Even a decision like taking 3 months off and knowing that you'll be okay is probably because of the power I got from overcoming that pain.
Mm.
Right. And so I spend a lot of time painting because that helps me feel like myself. And one of the big things that I did in this path to healing was I realized I needed to develop that mind body connection again. So I started going to yoga 3 to 4 times a week, and I would do hot yoga. And I needed to look at my body doing the things that are hard to do. So I consider it moving meditation, but the idea that while you're doing the yoga, you're also looking at yourself doing it, I think was incredibly powerful for me to build back that relationship with my body. I also, in terms of pleasure, like the mindset that, penetrative sex is not the end outcome,
Mhm.
pleasure is the outcome is huge.
Mhm.
So whether it is sexual in nature or with a partner or not, it doesn't matter. I'm just seeking pleasure in all aspects of life.
Mm, I love that. So it sounds like you had to develop the muscle of trusting your body and you used yoga as a way to kind of nurture that skill of, hey, my body can do hard things in hot settings. So I now have the confidence to know that I can do other hard things with my body.
Exactly. Exactly. And over time, your muscles also, it's almost like I can control my muscles a lot better now. So when I tell my brain tells my body to relax, it actually does relax because that trust has been rebuilt. We
Yeah.
are extremely, extremely adaptable beings. Like, it is completely possible
To
to
be able
build that connection
drop
back.
your pelvis. Yeah. I love it. But it takes practice, right? And so I'll oftentimes tell clients, hey, if it's painful, that means stop.
Hmm.
Because when you are feeding your brain these experiences that are traumatic and painful, your brain is responding by saying, okay, this is the expectation. This is what's going to happen every time. And so before we can return to pleasurable penetration, we have to feed our brain pleasurable experiences that are non penetrative. So
Exactly.
whether that is like having an orgasm alone or learning to even just like look at yourself in the mirror and not feel icked out by it, right? Like it really does take practice to then have ownership over your body and be able to control it in such a way as to say like, hey, I'm safe. I can relax.
Right. And I mean, by the time patients seek help, which is like, 6 years after or more after the onset of their symptoms, it's likely that they're in like a hypervigilant state already. They're like catastrophizing. So telling them to relax is not going to help. So, like, it's these strategies that you and I are talking about that will actually help. How do you integrate little by little
Hmm.
some form of pleasure and joy into your day to day?
And I love how you brought up like simply doing something like enjoying your coffee, right? Like slowing down and telling your brain, like, I am here right now. I am safe right now. I can enjoy the experiences that I'm experiencing without thinking about the next thing that I have to do. That's awesome. That's a great gym, even for people who don't have pain, right? Just like slow down, trust yourself, enjoy where you are.
Yes. And one thing I like to say to clients is like, two truths can be true. When you're in this super hyper vigilant state, you can be a sensual person, but then also be experiencing pain. You
Mhm.
could love your partner, but then be scared of the pain or the penetration, whatever it is,
Mhm.
right? You can feel guilty for not being able to have sex. You can feel resentment towards your partner, and you can feel deep love. Like, those are all things that are happening at the same time, which is why this can be very confusing.
So confusing. And then you add on top of that a healthcare system where you get 5 to 15 minutes to talk about your most intimate concerns. And it's like, do I have a fighting chance?
I'm so angry. I'm so angry because not everyone has the time or money to find a provider such as yourself who is so caring and spends an hour. And in my practice, one thing that I'm committing to is, because one of my biggest goals is to help women ask for help and get help earlier on, and
Mhm.
not waiting, like I did, like until I was probably like 28, 30. And so I think that has to begin like when they're 10, 12, 15, whenever it is. And I actually think it's especially important when a person is in college and they're probably having sex for the first time and it's starting to hurt. At that point, they probably can't afford really expensive appointments. And
Mhm.
so I'm planning to take on clients at like a free rate for, every certain number of clients that I
Mhm.
get to help those who are younger
So
manage
some form
their
of like charity care.
Yes,
I
exactly.
love that. I love that. And we do some charity care here too at Discover Health. And it is important for me, especially as a Black provider, to say, like, listen, we cannot work within the system, or we can, and there are some practices that are doing it and doing it well, but I tried that. I did it for a long time, so now I'm kind of bucking the system, creating my own way of doing things. But I also know how important it is for other people who look like me to be able to access someone like me. So I love that you are committed to like having charity care as a part of your mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the education that you're providing on your Instagram and TikTok, like that is going to enable someone who might not be able to come in for an appointment to ask the right questions to the provider that they do see. So it's helping people everywhere.
Good. I need to hear that because sometimes I'm like, am I just shouting into nothing? Like
You're
I'm
not. You're not.
making these videos, no one's gonna see it. Oh, okay, Preeti. So, what would you say to your younger self who was a teenager, maybe experiencing, pain with tampons or that initial pain with attempting intercourse? What sort of advice would you give to young Preeti?
Wow, that's a great question. Still can't insert a tampon to this day, but I would say that you are not broken and it is okay to ask for help and to talk with your parents and loved ones and your partner about this without feeling shame.
Mhm.
Because I didn't even tell my mom this was happening until my marriage was basically over. And I really regret that because there really is no shame. This is just like something I was born with that I needed to get care for. And so I wish that I had asked for help sooner.
Mhm.
And I would tell her that everything was going to be okay. And yeah, that's about it.
Mhm. Do you mind me asking? This is a very personal question because mother wounds are deep, but did you finally opening up to your mom, did that change the nature of your relationship at all?
Oh, absolutely. Both my parents, honestly. Like my dad asked me how pelvic floor PT is going. It was honestly my mom who encouraged me to have sex after going through all of this treatment to see if things were working or improving the way I expected. And so we just speak very openly about it in our family now. And I've also then started speaking to some of my cousins and aunts who I'm really close with and about a lot of these things as well. So it's we talk about all kinds of things now that, were kind of a closed book before.
I love that. So the Raju family has successfully tamed some of the taboos.
Exactly, exactly, exactly.
Good. Well, it has been such a pleasure talking to you today. I am so excited to have you as a resource for my clients and for my future clients. How can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on coachpreethi.com and or email me through there. And I am Heal Pelvic Pain on Instagram. I just started the account and will be posting some content. So please reach out. I'm just happy to talk in general. So
I love
I would appreciate that.
I love that.
And thank you so much, Jenna. You truly are an inspiration.
You are so welcome. I'm just doing what I was designed to do and hoping that we can have a ripple effect in the midst of it.
Yeah, it's like Maya Angelou. When healing takes place, go help others.
Go
Right.
help others. Yes, for sure. On that note, I just want to thank you again, Preethi. This has been such an incredible conversation. Cannot wait to get it out there. And I want to thank the audience for listening and helping us to tame the taboo. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Tame the Taboo. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe. Send this to your girlfriend so they can join you on your journey as we transition to our healthiest, wealthiest, best selves. See you on the next episode.